everyone. Welcome to Unapologetically You. This is the podcast where we explore health, wellness, and a little of the mindset shifts that's going to help you step fully into your power. Now, I'm your host, Tulshi, with my guest co-host, Christa. And today we're going to dive into mindset shift of the week, basically, our practical reframe that will help you challenge limiting beliefs and then rise above the thoughts that keep you trapped. Now, in this episode, both Christa and I are off of the video, but we are going to talk you through mindset shifts as an unseen perspective because we're talking about shifts from I can't to I can learn how. And this isn't just about blind optimism. It's about opening the door to possibility and giving yourself permission to grow. Now, before we dive straight in, I want my guest co-host to introduce themselves to you and share her own background. So, hi, Christa.
Hi, Tulsi.
Are you
I
happy to share your own background for our audience so they have a bit of an understanding about you?
absolutely. I always find it really important to get a little bit of background before I listen to anything. It kind of gives me like, hey, do you have have experience in this? Like, where do you come from? What's your story? I always wonder those things to myself. So I hope your audience also has those questions of, hey, where did that perspective come from? How'd you learn that? So I think it's really super important.
Amazing. So let's kick off. Well, what is your background?
So I began my career in medical laboratory sciences and technology with the US military in 2024. I studied the human body and disease processes. It led me to a little more in depth in pathology, and histopathology to be specific. So the background assisted and influenced my desire to make an impact, a bigger impact with not only process improvement, but patient care in the medical system. I did this through data quality, assurance, quality assurance, and as well resource management and planning. Alongside that career of about 20 years, I explored energetic healing through crystals, physical trauma release, Reiki, its correlation, and how it works with Western medicine. Um, the journey of this was deeply, deeply shaped by losing my husband in active duty service. I nearly lost my eldest daughter to a rare autoinflammatory disorder. And after all of those years, after a lot of those things, I survived a very big chapter of narcissistic abuse in my life, um, stripping me my savings, inheritance, everything stolen for me and my kids. But these experiences, I'm actually thankful for them. They guide me in healing mentally, emotionally, physically, but also setting the example and leading my daughters through every challenge they come through so they too can see perspective. And I've made it through all of these things, and I know others can too with a little guidance and a whole lot of love. And we always say love and light with everything, but it's not, it's not what everybody thinks it is. That love and light is a lot. I wish I had somebody to help guide me through all of those things. And I did it alone, not knowing how to. And I found you. And that's what makes it so special is maybe if I share my story, somebody else could see a different perspective in their journey. And the more, the more people that heal, the world can be the better place, right? So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for being so honest. I feel like this was the type of introduction that normally I do for every guest, but it was so in depth. I felt like it was so appropriate for you to give your own introduction, and you revealed quite a lot just in the intro. Like we didn't even need to go into the main portion of this where we talk about the hot topic of the day, which will be obviously about our mindset, but thank you so much for actually agreeing to come on as a co-host. And thank you for being a part of this new format of Unapologetically You. I know it's stripping you away from your comfort zone, but let's start with a little bit of a warm up. Now, Kelly and I usually begin with three questions. Now, would you be okay if we go through some of those questions? And it can also, for those of you who are listening, design you to think about yourself or a friend. So some of these questions might ignite some thoughts for you as a listener. So are we ready to go, Krista, for the first one?
Yes, ma'am.
What is your biggest win in this past week, would you say?
My biggest win this week is to give myself grace. It wasn't just give myself grace in general. It was enough grace, as if I wasn't giving myself the permission to be in my feelings and allow myself to purge as much as I needed to versus how much I wanted to.
And what would you say that made you smile? It could
What
be
made me
totally random.
oh, okay.
I always catch Kelly off guard whenever I ask this question, even though she
That did
knows which questions are happening every week.
that did catch me off guard a little bit. So, despite everything we go through, I think that when I was able to see, dang, I needed that extra little to hold a little bit more space for myself. And it made me smile because in that moment of just self, just me, just nature, I got to hear things and see things that I was oblivious to, but it also influenced how I looked at the situation I was going through that made me feel those things. And I know they're being brought up for a reason, but to see the beauty in the lesson, that's tremendous to me. And it doesn't become just a lesson learned, it's a lesson grown, right?
I think we're definitely going to hit this on the hot topic of the day regarding our mindset shift because it's actually saying that something that, I don't know, at the time probably made us cry can, to some degree, make us smile because we're able to see it from a different perspective, that we're able to value it maybe not at the time as we're going through it, but in the future sense that we're able to look back and with that perspective, we're able to understand how much we've grown as individuals or as a parent or a friend or a work colleague, whatever it may be, right? And I think that's a very huge part of our growth.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And this is a bit of a tricky question. Kelly always trips up with this one, but what would you say is your intention for this next week? Do you have a specific, I really want to get this done, or is there any intention that you would like to cement and tell the world?
So, my intention for this next week is really to be very intentional with the way that I express myself, the way that I show up in the world, the way that specifically for me speak in the world. Sometimes I just speak and it is what it is, and I'm just passionate about it. And other times I probably could have been a little more soft and gentle, um, rather than being excited and fiery. And this is what it is. Here you go. But rather, it's okay to let go, right? I'll say more compassionate. So speaking compassionate for myself.
Oh, okay, for yourself. And was that around others as well, or?
Yes, how I speak, that's like my personal intention and how I speak to others a little bit with a little bit more compassion. And it's not that I don't, I just don't initially pick up sometimes that they weren't ready for my excited, fiery self.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes
be
sense.
a little more self-aware in
Okay.
that regard.
Well, on the topic of being more self-aware, and obviously we've already touched it with those three questions, I'm going to bring in our hot topic of the day. And obviously, we've got it on the thumbnail, the mindset shifts and unseen perspective. For those of you who are on Spotify, please make sure you hit the follow button and subscribe. But Kelly and I usually have one main topic of the day. And today, obviously, we are identifying the limiting belief. Are we able, as people who are just on a podcast, are we able to recognize when our own thoughts are putting us in a box? What would you say is your current self-limiting belief? It's like ripping the band-aid off, right? It's like, let's go straight in.
Yeah. Self-limiting belief. Well, And it's, I fumble with this, and my self-limiting belief was believing an opinion about who I am from someone I cared about because the role they play in my life. I truly believe this stems from a place of people pleasing,
Yeah.
not because I can't or couldn't form my own opinion, but rather my intention behind my ways wasn't received in the past as being good or positive, rather blunt and apathetic in a way. In the way that I verbalized it, the statement or opinion I was asked for. So, a language of compassion for me was used against me, in my opinion. And I was like, wait a minute. I wonder if I'm coming off one way and I feel that I'm coming off the way I intended. However, the other person or situation I was dealing with may have had me try to think I'm just that way that they received it. But then I had to ask myself, what was my intention and were they willing to receive what they asked for, which was my opinion, right?
Right.
So I had to look at this in a 360 view from the bird's eye view to be honest. Was it limiting? It kind of limited how I wanted to show up because then I wasn't being my authentic self, and I really had to sit with that.
Okay, so just to go back a little bit. So your intention was to be more graceful about how you speak and the way you speak. So you could be
Hmm.
compassionate to yourself and others. But then you also have a self-limiting belief that you're, what was it? It was you were people pleasing, so you would adjust the way you would speak or communicate. Is that correct? Is that
Yes,
what's happening?
actually.
Okay, so
Yes.
we've kind of got a 360 vision right now because actually your intention is to um, be intentional about your words and how you communicate with yourself and others. But then your self-limiting beliefs is people pleasing and adjusting the way you speak and who you are in accordance to other
Right.
people's opinions. So isn't
Yeah,
that a bit of a conflict?
it is. I find a lot of conflict within myself in that,
Oh, okay.
actually. And while there are no coincidences, I feel not every situation is going to be the right place and the right time for whatever any energy, right? It might need to be a little bit more compassion based on the situation or graceful, you know, if situation where somebody's, in their feelings, but hey, I really want your opinion on this. So I felt the need to give a warning of this is my opinion. I'm not saying this is how it is. This is just what I feel.
Yeah.
I felt a need to cushion that a little bit.
Is
And
that
I didn't
because
feel
you were
good about that.
receiving negative feedback from people who had asked your opinion in the first place?
Yes,
Okay.
actually. And so I was dimming myself to sit at the table. And I just had to realize, like, that's not the table I want to sit at, to be honest.
Oh, I like that. Michelle Obama talks a lot about sitting at a table, doesn't she?
Mm,
Yeah. Like actually knowing who you want to be surrounded by. And I'm not talking about sheltering yourself so you don't hear different people's opinions and
hmm.
perspectives, but it's actually saying, well, is this actually conducive to your own growth and wellness? Because it can, a friendship group or a circle of people can actually be quite self-deprecating. But it's kind of trying to find that middle ground, isn't it? It's being with people who
Yes,
actually push you and help you grow, but also that you're not in this vortex and self-deprecating bubble.
absolutely. I felt like I was drowning for a minute there, trying to understand why. And truly, the answer is because I outgrew my environment,
Yeah,
specifically on that. And I said, okay, we cut people off, not because we have disfavor for them or anything, but I'm supposed to be going up. I don't
yeah.
want to go down. It took me a long time to get to the place where I could speak my truth in the way that I felt it. If that's not embraced also for being who I am, then what am I actually doing here? Because I was embracing all of the people I was surrounded with and taking it for what it was. It just was. And then I found myself tailoring how I spoke. And I was like, I just don't think that language is for me. I like my language.
Yeah. And I feel like we have different hats that we wear at home, that we wear at work, that we wear in social groups, in different social environments. But the thing is, if we're growing, we're constantly evolving and we're not the same person. Like I certainly am not the same person I was 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago. But it's actually saying, well, wait a second, the self-limiting belief might have continued and carried on through our evolution, but it's also saying, well, things change and the way
Hmm.
we communicate and the way we see things change. So it's actually saying, I'm growing too. Are you able to grow with me? Because if you're not, then, like you said, I think I've outgrown this circle or this table or these types of individuals who want to agree with me or communicate with me because they know the old version of me.
Yes. And I think that I was actually being rejected for my new height of growth. And I'm going to say height because I felt that I was actually coming out of a deeper space where I could not speak my truth. And I was, I was always told she has an attitude. Well, no, you just asked me for my opinion. And I just, I guess, didn't sugarcoat it for this time. And I just slowly started to realize, like, wow, I don't have anything in common with them anymore. I want to learn more of why did I think that? Why did I embrace their opinion as if it was mine, sort of? Does that make sense?
It does. I feel like sometimes when you're shown something so much, we tend to adopt that as our own mindset, as our own self-limiting belief. Like we may not have seen that as a self-limiting belief, but when more and more people call it out as being, I don't know, arrogant or advantageous or I don't know, people pleasing, we tend to think, well, I didn't know that wasn't okay until now people are pointing it out. And now we don't think it's okay. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I have a young teenager about to be 14, and I find that and I see it so much more now. She's in peer pressure, and it's kind
Wow.
of it very much so mirrors that energy at that age. But as an adult, we still go through these same things. But now I ask myself, how did I receive that? And was I open to constructive criticism? And truly, was this actually constructive, or were they telling me they just don't like that part of me?
Yeah. And you know what? Actually, it comes to social media. So I wanted to bring this in and talk about social media. Like, I noticed that there are certain platforms that are rampant over negative comments. But the thing is, isn't every comment a person's opinion? So then why are we, forgive the terminology that I'm using, I guess, why are we hell bent on saying, well, you need to be kind and you need to do this? Is it just because we want to see more kindness in the world? Well, like it is everybody else's opinion, and then we're having an opinion on why they're expressing who they truly are. Does that make sense?
It does. And it's so prominent, especially regarding social media. And I can go down the rabbit hole of, okay, well, that comment wasn't very nice telling me to be nice. And I
Yeah,
was actually being quite favorably nice in for myself, right? And
yeah.
I'll go back and look at that video and be like, I didn't call anybody out. I wasn't pointing fingers at any demographic. But we can go down the rabbit hole of let's look at their profile. And they have, we can do that. But it's not tit for tat. It's rather, hey, I want to respond to this comment that's telling me to be kind. Um, Let me show you an example. If you think that I'm not kind, is there something about yourself that you might also need to look at because this is my version of kind and yours might not be the same? And I'm okay with that. Thank you for your comment. People even receive comments like that in a negative light, and that's truly not where it's meant to be.
I
But
love
again,
what You said that. I absolutely love that you said that because actually, with everyone, they're only seeing it from their own perspective. They're only receiving us from their own perspective. So, say, for example, a person's been hurt in a relationship, the next relationship they're going into, they're still carrying that hurt. And the mindset could be, well, this person does this, and it means this new person I need to be wary of, or I need to control that aspect. So, say, for example, you've been cheated on. Oh, well, this next person may cheat on me. And it's carrying that previous hurt onto a new person, but a new person has done nothing to um put that old belief
Warrant such
in. Warrant.
a
Yeah, yeah. And I just feel like
pre, you
sometimes
know, yeah.
yeah, on social media, like it's saying, well, it doesn't matter how you read it. That wasn't my intention, but you're just going to read it from your perspective. And I feel like when I've put loads more content out there on social media lately, I felt the same thing. I was like, okay, well, that's an interesting comment based on what I've obviously produced as a creator. And then somebody else completely different comment. Like they receive it in such a different way. And I find it fascinating as a creator to go, oh, okay, well, that's where you're at. That's really, and that tells me a lot about you because it tells me where you're at. That's the type of like way I read comments now.
So here's another perspective for that is look at the look at the demographic that you have touched. They didn't know why they found you, but they felt the need to comment to create a space of connection where they really had the desire to want to know more, but it didn't make sense. And so
Yeah.
sometimes that little probably negative comment was really a cry out for help, but please help me see this in a different way. I don't understand. And that is where that space of grace for yourself to receive the negative comment, but really look into it is maybe they just didn't see how I intended. Let me word this in a different way. Not because we're tailoring to somebody else, but rather they find you on social media for a reason. Now, what's the reason? Because they're stuck somewhere and they're actually seeking help or seeking a different viewpoint, a different perspective on the topic you're talking about. And I found that actually be a lot very prominent as well with a couple of different readers that I'm friends with. Um, they just needed that extra couple words to understand the excuse me, the way that you were speaking. And it was like, oh, that makes so much more sense now. So
Yeah.
for myself, now that I'm seeing this for my own way of speaking, I'm like, oh, I guess the couple extra word does make a whole bit of difference, right?
Does. It does. And actually, I want to shift this conversation to reframing how we see things because obviously it does take a little bit of time, I feel, a little bit of growth, maybe even a little bit of a healing so we can reframe things. You know, like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast in the intro that how can we shift from I can't to I can learn how? And I want to get your perspective on how you will be able to do that as, you know, from your own experience, Christa. But basically, I wanted to kind of put a little bit of context in this. When I was shifting a specific belief, so say, for example, I was in pain in a certain body part, and I knew that it doesn't matter what type of like movement or exercise or any sort of relief I try and find in this area, I meditated on it, it wouldn't shift. And I knew to a degree, I was probably 99.9% sure it was a manifestation of something that was going on with me emotionally. So I am reading a lot more about how our physical health is obviously impacted from our mental health. And if our mental health is a little bit askew, like nobody's perfect, but it tends to show up in a physical, visceral way. Now, I've done this before, and I don't know whether I've said this to Kelly on the podcast, but basically I've done this before where I've focused on a specific part of my body and I've meditated on it, and touch wood, it's been amazing. I haven't had that pain since. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I can do that again. Maybe I can use that tool to get rid of this excruciating pain. I was in quite a lot of pain. And I did the meditation, and I was a little bit arrogant. I probably thought it was going to work straight away because it had worked in the past, and it didn't work. So I thought to myself, okay, well, this is weird. How do I accept this pain in the body? And I knew what the emotions were connected to it, and I didn't know what the origin of the pain was, but I just knew that this was an area of emotional turmoil. And I came across something in particular that I found shifted my perspective entirely. Now, I had seen something on social media, and it basically said that our soul has waited for an opportunity, that if we experience any anxiety, any heartache, any confusion, or any pain of any kind, we can actually declare this out to ourselves, that I love this moment. My soul was waiting for this moment since creation. And I can shift to the vibration of agreeing that there is a bigger picture, even if I can't see it now. And then it's actually saying to ourselves, oh, wait a second, how is this specific pain or hurt or um, piece of anxiety actually helping us in the longer term, even if we can't see the miracles right now? And no word of a lie, Krista, that excruciating pain completely disappeared from that moment on. As soon as I declared it, I was like, wait a second, I've moved out of this darkness and this deep, painful energy to now opening my eyes with certainty that, I may not see exactly why I may be in pain, but I'm accepting where my body is. I'm accepting what I need to learn at this time. I'm not making excuses. And it's actually led me to a different perspective of actually saying, this is leading to bigger things, to miracles, to greater things. And I do have a right and a purpose in regards to that. So I guess what my question would be is, if I can shift my perspective through reframing things, because obviously the previous tool didn't work this time around. So I shifted the tool that I was using and it worked miracles. I'm not going to lie. But then how would you say, from your experience and your perspective, how would you reframe something in your own way? How could you change it and it rewire your own motivation in this world? That's a very complex question, but
Oh,
let's see.
wow, I'm beside myself. That's actually very profound what you just shared about that core belief of pain. I was
Yeah.
here to feel.
Yeah.
That's huge.
I
You're
think
giving
so.
yourself yet again a permission. Like, this is what I came here for. I came here to conquer this. I can do this. And that reminder is, it's a lot because sometimes when we get there, we have a hard time finding out, how do I get to that moment that you're speaking on, where it's like a light switch, right?
Yeah.
So for me specifically, and I kind of spoke about this in the other questions that you had asked me, but asking myself hard questions was my intent. What was my intention in that moment? Either giving my perspective or receiving an opinion or other information. I had to really, this sounds terrible, go down the rabbit hole of, okay, was I open to constructive criticism or just criticism? Was this constructive at all? Do I feel heard or unseen in this moment? And then I have this problem with perfectionism. I have to know all of it. So I went down, okay, well, does their position in my life hold value? Is it reciprocated? And then sometimes I'm realizing that it's not reciprocated. This relationship actually holds no value to me. And it's unfortunate, but that was really the truth that I had to be okay with eventually saying. And that's where I had issues with. you know, speaking out loud and speaking my truth out loud because what I felt were projections. They thought they were helping me, but actually was hindering my own growth and trying to be better and trying to learn to communicate better in that way. And I had to ask myself in every situation, no matter whether this is financial, um, whether this is my in my area of my solar plexus, the confidence, I had to ask myself, what is the fact here? The fact is my intention was this. They didn't receive it as that. Okay. My intention wasn't that. I apologize. Let me rephrase that for you. So I would play this game of ring around the rosies with things, and they weren't actually open to what I was saying. They just wanted to fill the void. Well, to me, the fact is that was kind of a waste because I thought they valued their own growth, right? Not because what I'm saying is going to make them grow. It was just perspective so they could choose that if they wanted to. And it wasn't about molding. None of this is about molding to accommodate, but remaining in your own truth and acknowledging and giving your permission to actually feel what you're feeling, even if it's messy. But next time this happens, I'm going to not only be a little more compassionate in the way that I come across, but with myself in that moment of vulnerability that I'm sharing with somebody. That is a moment to me that I'm giving them a piece of my story that's truly important to me. And sometimes it's used as an example, sometimes it's not. But the fact is, that was my story. I didn't need anybody else to tell me how my story should feel because I already knew, I already experienced it, right? It was just showing them that, hey, all of these things, it affected how I slept. It affected how blocked up my throat chakra was and how much I could actually get out of it, you know, without feeling, um, feeling like I wasn't heard or that I wasn't seen or, man, nobody understands me. Like, am I speaking a different language? It was just that that circle wasn't around, was not for me. And I didn't get that. I didn't understand it. And so as one right after the other fell off, and I just kind of had to deal with, oh, okay, well, everybody's just kind of leaving my life. Oh, it hit me one day like a light switch. Like I was asking too many questions. I was asking myself questions and I asked them questions. They couldn't answer them anymore. And
Is that
so,
because they weren't deeply reflective enough and you were going down that rabbit hole yourself and you were intrigued and curious about that for yourself?
yes, I wasn't asking them for an answer. I was just like, I was kind of telling them how I'm telling you, like, I really had to sit with our conversation earlier. Like, what does it mean to me? And like how it made me feel. And that's not how our relationship is. Like, we kind of do things together. So let me bounce this idea off of you. Who are you? I asked the question. I had to ask them, who are you? "Well, what do you mean by that?" Like, they really sat with, who are you? Like, I was asking as if I was a complete stranger. And I was actually coming from the perspective of, what are you about?
Yeah. Yeah,
Who do you want to
actually,
show up as in this world? Like, what is this relationship we have? Like, how vulnerable is this in the best way for both of us? But nobody, and I'm not saying nobody but in that circle, it was, I was speaking a different language and they just didn't understand me. So eventually everybody kind of fell off. But the growth for me was that when I did that and I didn't have that negative pull on me, guess what came into my life? People who also wanted to grow, souls who also had these same goals of, I have to know why I do this. I want to understand all of it so I can embrace that portion of myself and support it more. Because I know I can. I've come this far to ask myself the hard questions, but it's not asking, it's answering the hard questions
yeah.
vulnerably, stripped down, just bare. It's answering them that gets you, wow, okay, well, I've lost that friend circle. Now I'm just going to go out in the world and be me, and who aligns with me is fantastic. And I've met some of the most amazing people. This is actually how I met you, is looking for the why for me.
Yeah, I
I
think
had to
that's so
understand why.
powerful.
And so
Definitely.
that's, sorry.
No, that was me. That was my fault. No, I was gonna say that that's definitely allowed us to go, "Well, wait a second, if we're formulating questions, uh, the biggest question I feel like when people say, "Who are you?" It's such a fully loaded question. And a lot of the default answers are, oh, well, my name is, I'm from, and my work is this, with my job title. And I feel like they're just superficial answers, not that doesn't actually get into the crux of who that person is or what they're about. And many people don't even ask themselves enough of those questions to truly understand themselves. But actually, for me, I was going to shift over to where the shifts have actually helped us individually overcome our own challenges. And I feel like for me, shifting that perspective of, we don't, a lot of times, many people go through the social media route to distract themselves, right? To
Hmm.
get a temporary fix. And I myself have done that. I'll put my hands up and say I've been guilty of doing that. But I feel like when we become more attuned to focusing and accepting whatever feeling or fear that is going on, it doesn't mean like I'm such a psychoanalyst and a journal avid writer anyway, but now I do less of that. I feel like because I'm writing more, not necessarily in my journal, but because I'm writing more, it almost gives me an avenue. And people probably might say, well, that in itself is a distraction. It probably is, but it also gives me awareness that do I need to sit with what this uncomfortable feeling is? Yes, some days I might need to delve deeper into understanding where those emotions and where that core hurt, wound has come from. But instead of dismissing it or going on social media or distracting myself with other things that maybe cheer you up, and this is what I was saying right at the beginning, we don't need to be positive optimists about these things. We can just sit in there and give ourselves time and space to feel the feeling and the emotion fully so we can let it go in a healthier way rather than compartmentalize it and store it for later. I
Yes.
feel like us we ask a lot of questions and Kelly does the same and she's amazing for this is we ask each other questions because we're genuinely curious about learning about whatever subject whatever person is in front of us we're genuinely curious but I feel like it can also help us feel unstuck around our own fears and our own challenges but that's kind of like a broad aspect of things. So where would you say your own shifts have happened regarding your own fears or challenges, based on obviously having these conversations that maybe have taken you to a different circle of people who are willing to answer those and ask those questions?
It would be inappropriate to answer your question with a question, but how vulnerable, how vulnerable are you willing to be with yourself? And I had to sit with that. And I say that because I didn't want to admit to myself that people that in my life, had to admit that they didn't hold value in what I valued. They didn't mirror back to me the honor, the integrity, and things like that. And I was like, oh, what am I missing? Am I missing something? Actually, I just had literally the wrong mindset at the moment, in that it wasn't that I was missing something. I was missing a part of myself that felt and knew with full conviction I didn't need someone outside of me. And saying that to yourself in the most vulnerable time, I was like going through the records room of my life story. And wow, I actually did all of those things on my own. And I have to do this every now and then when I come to a block that says, everything outside of me says you can't. You're only a woman. You're only, you're in a big game here at chess with a bunch of guys in this world of trade. And I'm over here like, and okay. let's show you perspective because I know I can do this. So some of me gets a little challenge in my own growth because I know I can do this. I've done this before and I've done this repeatedly for somebody else to limit me verbally. I think I kind of take that as like, oh, interesting. I kind of take that in a little egoic way, and I don't mean to, but I did it for myself, but I also did it for that I also do those things in a way that another person, she did it. I can do that. And I'm to use this as a very good example is this here podcast. I've never done this before. We're sitting here talking about communication vulnerability, and here I am. Hello, world, right? But what is the outcome of this? It might help that person
Yeah.
who was silenced as well, right?
Yeah.
That other perspective of maybe they might find some questions in here that we have asked each other. Man, they might be able to answer them now, right? And so I feel that vulnerability and that honest with self of can I actually do this? Well, I've done it before. Doesn't matter if you got the mail on your bike with no pockets, or you got home from the gas station on roller skates and you didn't spill it with a drink, right? It doesn't matter what it is. It was something you accomplished it. You can do this again. And I have to remind myself that sometimes when I feel challenged, because emotionally I have been through it. But I also know that emotionally I can get out of that energy and use it to help guide me in the questions that I need to ask myself to do this again, right?
Yeah, and I find that really interesting because I said this to Kelly on a previous podcast, and I don't ask me which one it was, but when I said our threshold of our strength, of our emotions gets higher and higher because the thing that challenged us 5 years ago is no longer challenge anymore. So our threshold has
Yes.
increased. So we are able to come up with viable solutions because we've gone through it in the moment. And yes, the best thing is when we can share that experience with other people who may be going through it. And that could be very, very valuable for a person who's struggling with that type of situation at that time. But then also, well, things like that don't challenge us anymore. I'm not saying that, the the challenges have become more crazy or hard or challenging even. But what I'm saying
Hmm.
is, our threshold has reached a certain frame, and then there's going to be something that knocks that. So we're able to strengthen that. And every time it knocks, our strength tolerance, our threshold gets higher and higher. But that's the type of energy that I'm kind of like feeling that what you were saying, in terms of understanding what you've been through, helping others communicate that. And I feel like even by you agreeing to be a guest co-host on this podcast, it pushes you into the deep end. It's not just like, let's go for a little paddle. It's like, no, let's just throw her into the ocean. So I deeply appreciate that. But Krista, I wanted to get your take a little bit on the science bit. I'm actually curious because I know you have a lot of experience that you spoke about already. You've got a lot of experience around physiology, the medicinal side of things. You've also got a lot of experience around Western medicine as well as the Eastern side of the medicine, not only from your experience as your degree, but also your work and also with your daughter. I always feel like with me having worked with cerebral palsy children, nobody knows that disorder or that complication than the parents because they've done their research, right? And if they tell you something,
Hmm.
you listen. Even though you've got your own education and qualifications, it's still important for us to understand what the parents' perspective is because they've done a whole host of research. And so I was wondering if you've already heard of some of these, and I'm going to reel out some of the studies that I found actually online from Stanford. And it basically talks about reframing thoughts and the way it impacts our brain's neuroplasticity. It basically builds confidence loops. So I'm going to talk about them, and you could just tell me your perspective maybe after, or whether you've heard about any of these studies. So Stanford study found that something is quite shocking. The mind can rewire the body in real time just through belief. So your brain isn't just observing your life, it's actually building it with every thought you repeat. And what you believe influences how your body reacts. So one study that the Stanford University actually did. They used a group of people and they were given the same milkshake. So you've got one of the groups that were told that this milkshake is an indulgence. And then the second group were told this milkshake is low calorie. And then the group that had thoughts that it was rich and satisfying, their hunger hormones actually dropped, like physically dropped. And they actually felt fuller because of what they believed. And then another study, there was a bunch of hotel workers who were told your daily job is already great exercise. And that single mindset shift actually led to lower blood pressure, reduced body fat, and it improved their health without changing anything else in their routine. And then there are also patients with chronic pain. They were given a placebo and they were told it's going to help them. Just from that placebo, they had reported less discomfort, using fewer medications, and then had shorter hospital stayed, all because they believed what they believed changed how they healed. So, what I'm trying to say is every thought you repeat, every story you believe, every label you accept actually programs our epigenetics, our body. And it isn't just reinforcing positive affirmations or, positive words, I guess. It's practicing the internal state that you want your nervous system to normalize. And then that repetition becomes reality. So when you speak to yourself, your body is an echo and it is a message throughout your cells and your nervous system as well as your life. Um, so basically, what I'm trying to say is I've personally tried to be mindful of my thoughts because I feel like our thoughts, I wrote this in my first book actually, of how many thoughts we go through. It's probably an overused statistic of thousands of thoughts are repeated each and every day. But the thing is, we're forgetting that those words, our thoughts, how we speak, are actual portals. They're instructions, and your body is always, always listening. So what is your take on, if first of you've ever heard of those studies, and second, how has that made you more graceful in the way you communicate? Because that was one of your biggest intentions this coming week, right? Is to show yourself grace around communication and the way you communicate.
Yes, it's I love that you brought up your first book because it is sitting on my nightstand
I
and I have
love
been, I didn't tell you this, but it is
it.
sitting on my nightstand. And for the last 3 weeks, I have specifically been skimming for specific parts that I loved the first time I read it because there was
Oh,
words I was missing in shifting my own mindset. And I was like, I have read these before. I was going through my brain. I feel like I call it the records room. Like, I know I've seen this and I'm not searching social media for it. No, I'm going to go back to this book and I'm going to find it. And when I found it, I read it aloud to my partner, and he just looked at me like a deer in headlights and blink, blink. And I said, "This is where I was struggling, and I was trying to give you an example because this did come up. Is that um, my need for a little more grace in what I was saying? I was just missing the couple connecting words, not for the lack of um, words not being there. I just kept getting a blank, like, no, you need the specific one. That's the perfectionist in me. But you're absolutely right. In the way that we talk to ourselves, And the way that so for me, it was me sharing what I'm going through and learning about in a way that could have a good productive conversation. And so I had an example in front of me of what I was trying to say. I read it and then I repeated what I said. And then his face was like, oh, whoops. So while both of us had a portion of the misunderstanding, I was trying to physically show him something that, you know, he could better understand. And so, in regards to the studies and how you think and how you perceive um, what you're doing, i.e., chronic pain, the placebo can help. I've done this with myself as well as my daughter with an inflammatory disorder. Um, and it's been a struggle for her. And so, autoinflammatory disorders, they can come about and have flare ups with almost any thought. And so she was really stuck in some grief and hardship. And that's actually what caused a lot of her pain. And understanding it more now, we're doing more family practices together, one on one, individually, talking to yourself in the mirror. I give them compliments more out loud, and they'll look at me like, that was random. That's okay. And they were getting more comfortable receiving. And so that's what I found, specifically the one, my oldest with the autoinflammatory disorder. She didn't know how to receive because all she ever knew from pain, from immobility, was that hindrance. I'm not going to be able to do what other kids do. I'm not going to be able to do sports like other kids do. Like, why me? Why she couldn't answer those hard questions. But I truly believe that there comes a point of so much repetition in what we tell ourselves. I had to be her example. She actually got into a really good space with me physically, and she wanted to go join the wrestling team. I said, "You do exactly what you want to. High school wrestling is a lot physically. Wrestling in general is a lot." And she just had this inkling of, I think I can. Mom, can you come to practice? Let me tell you, the pit of my stomach sparked fireworks like, oh my gosh, I am how old trying to attend a high school wrestling practice, But just attending, I didn't have to do anything. I thought she wanted me to get on a mat. No, she just needed support in the area that she was telling herself that she could properly. There was no proper way. She just needed somebody to show up. And it didn't even last very long. She ended up wrestling for 3 years. She's amazing. She actually ended up fourth in state overall for her senior year. She's never been that in that physical shape since she was 6. And in the same year, only 6 months later, from that state championship, she was in the hospital almost dying. So mindset is everything. And what you think you need to know about your body sometimes actually isn't, but the capacity that you can hold, that resilience you have for yourself is everything. And what you tell yourself, I can do this. And you might be on your 56th rep of squats. I might have made it to the top with some assistance, but I made it. So
Mm.
did you do this? Like, are you 100% positive you did the best you could? Yes, that's good enough for me. High five, right? We started implementing these motivational things. So I totally 100% agree with that. In every area that you can support your physical, mental, emotional self in those ways without it being you have to this, because that isn't always the answer. It's different for everybody. That positive reinforcement versus um, practicing it in a more fine-tuned way specific to the individual. Um, because your body is the echo of what you believe. And that was my job, is to be her mental coach. Stop fighting yourself. You're going to be fine. Mom, I have to throw up. I'm so nervous. Are you nervous? Are you excited? let's go. Like, come on, and we'd get pumped up and the nausea would go away. It was sitting with it, stewing on it with no output. What'd I do? We went walking to warm her up rather than standing there jumping up and down. Everything is, there is an output for every feeling. But what happens when there's no output? That's when that pain and those feelings stay. The feelings in the body, those thoughts in the mind that clutter your day. And sometimes you just kind of have a day we call blah, where I was present, but not really, right? So we need an outlet for those. And I implore anybody to find that outlet. It could be just walking around the office. You could, I mean, anything. For I have children. We liked to put a target on a tree and spit wads through a straw. As childish as that sounds, it is an output. They hit the target. Now, that thought of, I knew I could do it. Okay, so what are you waiting for? Mom, here's my straw. I'll be back, right? It doesn't matter how it is or what it is. For every age, there is something. So that is a very huge part of all of these mindset shifts and perspective is how you're thinking about this and what that is that core belief in yourself. What started this core belief? How did it get me to where I'm at? Okay, well, now let's go back to the core belief. Was it true? Well, no, I'm actually not a bad person. Then why are you still believing that? I don't know. Oh, well, you needed permission to allow yourself not to think that way and allow yourself to be healthy and allow yourself to, I'm choosing to eat better. I'm choosing to go walking every day at work, even though it's 9,000 degrees outside. It's not the most miserable, but it's kind of miserable. But guess what the output is? I'm sweating. I'm moving. My brain is calm because I can hear the birds, the trees, feel the wind. That was way more output that I asked for just because it's so hot. But it's something, and I was able to find a little more peace that day and grounding within myself to keep that. I knew I could do it. I just had to get out there. I wasn't happy at first, but I am now that I'm finished. So I hope that answered your question
Yeah,
a
I
little bit.
love that perspective. Thank you so much for sharing, especially when you were saying about your daughter going into wrestling. Like that can be such a jumping out of her comfort zone to the extreme, right? Not probably feeling her physical body has failed her. That's probably the biggest hurdle to overcome. To
Yes.
then trusting what the movements can do, and then trusting that they'll come to fruition through practice, through regular scheduled events, right? When you have your own, okay, well, this is the move that I plan to do if this person does this. And I feel like you've probably gone straight into, I would call it a health motivational tip of the day, the practical exercises of
Mm,
actually, guys, if you can, just go back to the last like 5 minutes and just have a review of how you can reframe the things that you're going through and maybe even spot any self-sabotage patterns and maybe even just think to yourself, write this down. I'm such a big believer of writing things down to kind of, it's like a pensive, right? It's like the Dumbledore's taking it out of his wand, putting it in the pensive so we can actually look at it from a different perspective. And that's what pen to paper or even writing it out on a digital device does for you, is saying, what can you see as being a cycle and how have you identified with it? When does it occur? And sometimes it evolves through a culmination between, we've gone through a hard day or we've gone through work and nothing's gone right, and then all of a sudden we're in that low-ish mindset and we fall back into those self-sabotaging patterns and behaviors. And I really love that you said, go out and do something, channel that energy, because at the end of the day, it could be, I don't know, it could be going for a walk, as you said, Christa. It could be picking up some paintwork, just expressing yourself in a way, listening to music, dancing. When you're able to channel that, you don't have to necessarily psychoanalyze, as what I mentioned earlier, every single detail of that, every single core wound. Like sometimes that does help. Sometimes therapy helps. But what tools help you in that given moment? Because one day,
Yes.
one thing could help you, and another day, as I mentioned earlier, I tried meditation, it didn't work. So I tried something else. And I feel like when we're able to truly shift our perspective into that unwavering sense of belief, it makes us feel more powerful, which is why, like, there has been evidence about people standing in the superhero pose. There's a reason why even just mimicking a posture can actually infuse confidence and belief in ourselves. And so, thank you so much, Krista, for actually sharing some of those practical exercises. I just wanted to actually add on as well what I did in the past. It was a bit like over the top. I think I get that Virgo tendency that you're talking about, Krista, about perfectionism. Somebody asked me, I found this on social media, and she said, write down every negative thought that you have in your head. Like negative thought, as in compartmentalize it. Negative thought about your finances or money or relationships or your body or work, So I did this. I probably created about 6 A4 pages, and I basically wrote down every negative thought I had about either my body or I've heard or that was in my head. It was like floating around in my head like the stars in the cosmos, and I wrote them all down. And then I went
Hmm.
over them all again, and it was obviously quite long. So I went over them again, and I put them aside. I didn't really do anything with them apart from, oh, I remember this self-limiting belief. I remember being told this when I was a child. I'm going to write that down. And then all of a sudden, obviously, I left a gap in between each statement. And then below that gap, a few days later, I wrote a positive way of seeing it. So, say, for example, oh, you have to work hard in life to get anywhere. Like that is one person's belief, and it has been spread out through a lot of different social media and even corporate environments, like sleep when you're dead, for example, all those things. And so I'm saying is you don't need to find a new motivational quote to replace it. What you can do is say, actually, I've done these things and they haven't been difficult. They've been time consuming and focused, energetic work, but they haven't had to be hard. I don't need to work hard in order to bring things to fruition, right? Or I don't, I can honor my sleep because I know cognitive function is important when it comes to um, work in the corporate environment or communicating with my friends or things like that. So
Hmm.
basically, that's another thought I wanted to obviously throw out there. We have one final thing. We normally do a health motivational tip of the day. I feel like we've already kind of put some snippets that people can actually use. But Kelly, this was actually Kelly's idea, and she's gonna probably love that we're able to do this for the first time on this podcast. Is we're actually gonna pull a card. We're actually going to pull, it'll be either an oracle or a tarot reading card. And we're actually going to ask ourselves. So, well, if you've got cards at home, you guys, like pick them up. If you've got angel cards, whatever. Or you can just listen to this segment because we were right at the end. So, the last 10 minutes of our podcast, wanted to kind of reframe our own self-limiting beliefs. And I'm going to pull out a card. So I'm going to read my card. And Krista, I believe you also have a deck and you're going to pull out a card as well. So I'm going to give you as my wonderful co-host, and thank you for being here on the first season 6, episode 1. Do you want to go first and read it out, or do you want me to speak about what my card is before?
Wow. I'm gonna let you go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Well,
I
I'm
will
only
follow
saying
your
it
lead.
because I already picked it out. So, before we actually started, I picked out a Divine Feminine Oracle, and this is by Megan Waterson. So, as I was thinking about, this whole podcast is about mindset shifts and unseen perspective. How can one card give us that different perspective? So the card that actually was chosen, it was picked out, it was called the White Buffalo Calf Woman. And she is the prophetess of the sacred way. And her mantra or words, if you will, is my heart is a compass and the path of love is true abundance. So, this is a bit about who she is. The white buffalo calf woman represents the sacred vision that gives us hope that all will be provided for us. So the white buffalo calf woman is the primary cultural prophet of the Lakota religion, and buffalo are considered sacred to the plains people, and they are seen as messengers from the ancestors. A Lakota legend says that two young scouts went out in search for food during a famine. They saw a stunningly beautiful woman appear before them in radiant white light. So the first scout approached her with an unholy intentions, and the second scout watched as the first man turned to bones the instant he tried to touch her. Now, she was clearly a Lila Wakan, very holy. Thankfully, he knew this. So she asked him to approach her because she could see into his heart and she could see his intentions were good. So she told him to prepare for her arrival in the village, and he went back and gathered everyone together, basically, and they appeared before them. And she taught the people of the community of that village the seven sacred rites of the Lakota people, including the sacred pipe ceremony. And that binds men and women together in a circle of love and mutual respect. So the white buffalo calf woman is here today to give you a reminder that you don't have to struggle to receive all that you've desired. And when we join our heart's longing with action, we find that there is a sacred way to move through the world. That the sacred way is a path of steady, quiet alignment between the heart's intention and our every step. So the white buffalo calf woman is more of an omen of hope that all will be provided for us when we approach each situation with love. And what she wants us to focus on is the intention behind an action, because that changes the outcome. She's a sacred prophetic sign, and we can receive what we need without fighting for it or trying to secure it through manipulation. So when prayer joins right action, when we move from that intention of creating only more love, then abundance is inevitable. And so when we seek not only just for ourselves, but also for the benefit of our loved ones and the community, our needs are divinely met. So the most sacred path is the one abundant with love. So I guess the meditation or the question you could ask is, what is my intention for the work I am currently doing? And the intention could be that my heart is a compass and the path of love is true abundance. So that's what I have. Do you have any additions to that one, Krista?
Wow. So I do have an oracle deck in front of me. Um, this oracle deck is Attract and Create the Love You Desire. It's a True Love Oracle deck by Belinda Grace. The My reasons for this is because by choosing this deck actually was we're talking about being balanced within ourselves and seeing being balanced enough to vulnerable enough to see these other perspectives, right? So I pulled the Silver Waterfall. I'm going to read you the insert in the book about this. Stay balanced, healthy, and happy by raising your own vibration. I thought this was fairly prevalent. Many people feel that they are always picking up on other people's negative energy and want to know how to protect themselves from this unpleasantness. They perceive the negativity to be out there and believe that if they could shield themselves from it, they would feel better. The truth is we all carry negative and positive energies. And we all have times in our lives when we feel low. To feel truly lovable, abundant, you need to be able to engage with whoever and whatever comes to you without feeling like you need some form of defense. Not only does your aura or personal energy field experience highs and lows of everything that's going on around you, so does your nervous system and the cells of your body. You are likely a finely tuned instrument that is constantly testing the atmosphere for anything unusual, unfamiliar, or threatening. It's all out there, but barricading yourself against the world is not the solution. Best way to stay balanced and healthy in a busy world is to raise your vibration in as many ways as possible. Whether this is food, looking after your own body with rest, exercise, feeding your mind with uplifting material like beautiful music, books, and movies, regular contact with nature, and cleansing yourself at the end of each day. This is done not to protect you from anything negative, but as the angels prefer to describe it, to release anything that doesn't belong to you and anything you don't need anymore. This can also be done by following the process called the silver waterfall. It is most beneficial at the end of the day. Now, this silver waterfall is just that. Imagine yourself standing under a glorious waterfall of silver energy and light. Let your imagination flow too. Picture a wonderful scene of a rainforest with a silver waterfall pouring out of the sky. Feel the shimmering energy flowing through and over you, washing away energy you don't need anymore or that doesn't belong to you. Feel it or visualize it, draining away into the floor and being absorbed by Mother Earth. Let the silver waterfall flow for as long as you need it to, picturing as much or as little detail as you like of the energy flowing through your aura, through your hair, and every cell in your body. Let it all drain away. Feel the refreshed light and energy that is all through and around you, tickling and sparkling. I thought that actually held some value in what we were speaking of outside versus inside.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was spot on for like rounding up this podcast. I definitely agree that that message should have been the last message of this podcast. I felt like it was so synchronistic as, we don't have to keep holding on to other people's energies or thinking that it's bringing us down. And then we can end up sabotaging ourselves because as I said earlier in the podcast, we don't have to block ourselves off from that a negative viewpoint. That's the world, right? It's almost like we do need to accept other people's um versions of themselves as they are, right? If we want to be
Yep.
accepted as we are, we kind of need to take some humble pie and acknowledge, well, that's where they're at right now, and that's okay.
Yes. Yes.
Well, Krista, it's just been such a joy. Thank you so much for taking time out to join me and co-host with this podcast. Now, we've got a few more lined up as Kelly's busy doing her own thing and renovating houses and all these different things in Australia. But thank you so much, Krista, for joining me today. And we're going to be back very, very soon, you guys. So this isn't the first or last time you're hearing from her. So guys, thank you so much for joining us on Unapologetically You. And if today's mindset shift resonated with you, I would love if you can share this podcast with somebody who might need a little boost this week. Hit subscribe and tap the notification bell if you're on YouTube so you never miss an episode. And remember, the sky isn't the limit, it's just the view. So keep being unapologetically you. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.